Welcome to Geeks and Grounds, a monthly game club and weekly podcast where we play games and brew good conversation together. I'm your host, Jenny Wyndham.
And I'm Joel Thomas.
And strap yourselves in because we're about to escape from Arcadia, everyone.
Beep, beep, everyone. We're driving our electric car straight out of the dome today.
Yeah, I am so excited to talk about the ending of American Arcadia. It's the game we've been playing all month as a Geeks and Grounds crew. So if you're starting here, you can continue to listen, but I would say if you haven't played American Arcadia, you may be coming in a little hot and a little bit late on some of the story beats. So I recommend maybe going back to the first of the American Arcadia arc and catching up on the story there. But if you have been playing along, if you've been listening along, we are going to get into it today because the ending was just blew my mind, honestly.
What a treat.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to get into this. It was an honor, absolute honor getting to talk to the team about the creative process behind the game. And there are some really interesting insights that I'm excited to kind of bring home to roost as we get into the end game.
Yes. Again, if you have been listening to the podcast, it's super helpful if you're on Spotify to give us a little rating. That's always nice because it helps just, again, boost visibility, allows other people to discover the podcast. And let's see. I was going to say, we usually start with the pastry case. This week, we are recording a little bit early, a little bit ahead of time. So we don't want to cover necessarily any news, or we don't have news to cover because we don't know what's coming out this week because we're recording this early. But I did want to dive into some of what we've been reading, playing, and watching outside of American Arcadia. Joel, you've been playing a lot of a certain game. What game is that?
I cannot get enough of Batro. It's my I'm cuddled up in bed and I want to just do one more thing to feel like I maximized my day. And it's like, we're just going to do one good Batro run.
Mm-hmm.
And my goodness, this game is so addicting. I still don't fully understand all of the rules. I feel like I'm still missing some things, but I'm doing well enough that I'm truly, truly enjoying it.
Nice. What do you have a favorite Joker or a favorite combo of, like, I forget what they call them. Like, is it the spectral cards and like the tarot cards? Like, do you have a favorite sort of build that you like to run with?
So I'm doing the +1 to your hand build. That's
Mm-hmm.
it's like a blue build or something like that. And it's an early game build. But there is a Joker card. So for those of you who don't know, Batro is kind of like a poker roguelite. Is that the framing?
Kind of. Although I would
you're
argue
like-
it's like you use poker hands, but this is, I described it to a friend actually just earlier today as Solitaire on steroids. I feel like it plays,
Okay.
to me, it plays more like Solitaire than poker, even though it uses poker hands.
Interesting. I could see that. That makes a lot of sense to me. I like that framing a lot. It doesn't feel like you're playing poker,
No,
for sure.
yeah.
Like the patterns that you're going to use are poker patterns, like the hands.
Mhm.
But it feels like, I don't know, like it feels like a strategy game more than anything else. Whereas
Mhm.
poker feels like a true game of, luck and strategy. There's way less luck in this. It's more, you can add bonuses and buffs to cards and things.
Mhm.
My favorite run right now, there's this Joker that I got, that Jokers kind of enhance your hand and give you special things, that gives you like a crazy high multiplier if you play 3 or fewer cards. And so I'll get that Joker and then buff my 2 of a kind, 3 of a kind hand bonuses.
Mm-hmm.
And that has gotten me crazy far, just that, with just those things alone.
Mm-hmm.
But there, and then like I'll pair that with a Joker that gives you a multiplier for the fewer amount of Jokers that you have. So it's like those 2 Jokers will carry me pretty far. So I'm really enjoying it. I know, I can tell that there is one aspect of this game that I am just not clocking, but I can't put my finger on it yet to Google it. So that's classic Joel playing games scenario. Are you still playing it at all? Because you're the one who kind of got me into this.
I'm not. Actually, I was talking with a friend today because she was saying how she's also just nonstop been playing it. And I'm like, it was kind of a hot flash for me where I played it super intensely for about 2 or 3 weeks and then just stopped. And I have just not picked it up since. I'm sure I will, but Stardew Valley honestly has been my
Oh,
go-to,
right.
like running, like just what do I need to do to wind down before bed? And yeah, so Stardew Valley's been that game for me personally, which is again, I feel silly because I'm not playing the update and I have my Steam Deck. I should just play the Steam Deck, but I've been playing it on my Switch, just because the Switch is just so much lighter and a little bit easier to hold. The battery life is a little better. Um,
Yeah, not quite as hot.
no, yeah, it does not feel like airplane is taken off in my hands. So
The next round of the Steam Deck, I'm convinced, is going to be fantastic.
I
But
think
it's
they did have, can't remember if it was just announced or if they already made it, but I think they did have like a Steam Deck Pro or like OLED equivalent where it's like it's a little
oh,
bit nicer screen, a little bit lighter. Supposedly it's not as loud. So if anyone's in the market, maybe it's a good time. I don't know. I don't even know if they're
um,
still around or if it's like back ordered still.
oh yeah, I have no idea.
Hmm.
I still like it. It's a good system, but yeah, definitely has a couple of drawbacks.
Hmm.
I would say. But yeah, so I've been playing a lot of Batro, and then y'all know I'm into that Dimension 20 on Dropout Life TV series and their current season, which is Fantasy High Junior Year. Absolutely knocking my socks off. It's like a live play D&D show,
Hmm.
and they're playing high schoolers in like a 1980s John Hughes esque environment. So it's very very fun and it's just emotionally compelling storytelling and improv artists, which is always amazing to me. So would, as always, highly recommend.
Nice. I feel
What are
like
you getting into? Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I feel like I saw them like on tour or something. It was like some of the Dimension 20 crew, they were doing a live play of one of their campaigns on TikTok and it looked really interesting. I was like, huh. Again, it's still
Mhm.
something that I feel like I've listened to casually. I have not found myself getting super into it. And I'm really kind of trying to think why because I just find it really interesting. I'm like, I really love playing D&D. I think and that's it. I love playing it and it's not as exciting to me if I'm not like part of the campaign itself. But
Yeah.
it's weird because I'm like, I like listening to podcasts and essentially it's a narrative podcast. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm like
That's
just
real.
haven't found. I need to try the school one that you mentioned. Not this one. It was like
Uh, Misfits and Magic.
yes, I want to try that one, which I
That's a good
haven't
one.
yet, but I think that one, if there was anything to like hook me, I think that premise probably
Yeah.
is the one.
I know I've plugged this one before, but I also really loved of Faye and Flowers, which is like a Jane Austen
Hmm.
version of it, which is just like a dating sim essentially. And it was so good. Like the spicy, like two characters getting together finally at the end of the season as the rain comes down and one is professing their love. Like I just give me that straight into my veins. I
Yeah.
love that shit. Um, yeah, no, I really enjoy it. Actually, it's funny you mentioned the live show because the week of April 18th, Jesus, there was a big controversy about Ticketmaster because they released tickets this week for a live show at Madison Square Gardens, one of the first ones they've ever done. And they didn't they've released like a 4-page statement about this, but they didn't realize what was going to happen with the like
Ooh.
from Ticketmaster, and essentially like nosebleed seats for like $700 uh, out.
Oh my
And so
God.
like profusely apologizing and all this stuff. And then it was the next day the SEC announced that they're going to be investigating Ticketmaster for monopoly practices, which is like finally,
Finally. You know,
finally.
it's what's really interesting. I forget the artist. This was an artist that I've never heard of before, but I saw the thing on, I think it was Instagram, where it talked about how to combat what she knew Ticketmaster would do with her ticket sales. She ended up creating like five or six different spots and stops where it was like a ticket selling tour. And so she actually would go to specific places and say, on this day, we're going to sell tickets. We're going to do it in person. So it's kind of a mini event. But I'm personally going to be behind this like other organization or mom and pop store selling tickets so that we know you're not going to get upcharged like in the way that Ticketmaster will. And it was really interesting to see an artist just directly say, I'm not selling through Ticketmaster or any similar platform because it's going to completely spike the prices unfairly. So I'm glad finally they're getting investigated.
That's amazing. Yeah,
Mhm.
I am so happy about it. As a person who regularly goes to shows of all kinds, it's a real frustration. So
Mm.
yeah, but yeah, enough about the sad stuff. What are you enjoying right now, Jenny?
Well, I had a couple of movies. Well, one movie, one I guess like quote comedy show, but it was a bit more than comedy show that I rewatched. The first movie that I watched was called Dream Scenario, and it has Nicolas Cage in it. I had no idea what it was. Just saw it as like a title card on HBO or Max or whatever they want to call it. And I said, you know what, Nicolas Cage, he's a funny guy. I'll put it on, just see like whatever this is. And I had no idea. Um, this movie, Dream Scenario, is about a man. The parallels to American Arcadia were actually quite striking in the first half of the movie. Uh, Normal man, almost beyond normal, like to the unassuming, like hapless, um underdog, like nobody even pays attention to him kind of man, like just definitely like worse than Trevor, honestly.
Would you say sad sack?
This is a genuine sad sack, yes.
Okay, okay.
Nicolas Cage, he did a great job in this role, I think. um he is this professor who just is not finding like true success or recognition, and he feels invisible in his world. But then suddenly everyone, or many people, most people start having dreams that with him in it, where he is like a character in their dreams, and so millions of people around the world start recognizing him. um that progresses in a lot of really darkly comedic ways. The movie in the second half takes a very dark turn when those dreams evolve, and I won't say much more than that because part of the joy of discovery in this movie is seeing what happens. I thought it was really, really interesting, and again, considering that question of like what happens when someone who doesn't consider their life or consider themselves valued in certain ways all of a sudden sees themselves as valued, sees people paying attention, like what are some of the implications of that, I think were really, really interesting. And this movie I thought was had kind of raunchy in some places, definitely bloody in some places, but had some of like one of the funniest scenes I've ever seen ever. Um One of the most awkward scenes ever, but it was hilarious. And I just thought it was a good movie. Like definite, I would say 7.5 out of 10, which for me is quite solid. Um yeah, loved it.
Pretty good.
Yeah,
That's
seven.
was it A24? I feel like I remember seeing the previews for this.
Yeah, it was A24. Yeah, I was like, I didn't even know this existed. Yeah, I'd give it a solid like 7 out of 10, 7.5 out of 10. I think the ending for me, I wished it had gone further with some of what they introduced, but the
Mm,
beginning, like, had me hooked for sure. So,
that's so
yeah.
cool. That's interesting. This idea of like characters that are I'll use the word nobodies loosely,
Mhm.
that kind of essentially get thrust into this like a spotlight role or get a lot of power all of a sudden,
Mhm.
and how they respond to that. I feel like I've seen that in a few places now. It's one of the themes in the Fallout show, and
Oh.
we're kind of seeing a dark. Well, I'm only a couple episodes in, so this is not like major stories spoilers, but I'm like, you're starting to see kind of a dark path that this character is taking now that he's encountered like this spike in power and authority.
Mhm.
And man, there's something about Breaking Bad characters that just it sucks me in as an audience member.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know, I think especially considering the topic that we've been circling around this month, like sort of the power of posting yourself on social media, the power of reality TV,
Mm,
and being
hmm.
like not as private, and having metrics in some way determine like value for some people, if you know, who are online in that kind of way. I think exploring virality is really interesting. And so yeah, I think what's it called, dream scenario, yeah, dream scenario explores this concept of virality and like personal identity in a way that I found cool and compelling.
Ooh.
um and yeah, if you're wanting to watch it, it's good companion, I think, a surprising one because I did not know it was going to be related at all. Again, I was just like, Nicolas Cage, funny guy, uh bit of a meme, but I think this movie definitely showed he wasn't. just a meme. I think he did a pretty good job there.
There's a great Community episode about all the different flavors of Nicolas Cage and just like all the different types of roles he's played.
Yeah.
And it's one of my favorite things in TV is like this episode. And it is absolutely wild. Like the question is like, is Nicolas Cage a good actor? And like for me, there's no doubt like he has done so many wide ranging roles. And there are
Yeah.
roles like I still think about Matchstick Men, which is like 2001, 2002 is like one of my favorite movies with him. Like yeah, absolutely incredible actor.
You know, I actually have not seen very many of his movies, so I really mostly know him from a lot of like the meme culture on the internet. I will
Okay.
say, um, he gives me Adam Sandler impressions in the sense that I think probably when he does comedy, cheesy, I don't think like I personally don't enjoy Adam Sandler's brand of comedy, or at least the what he did, especially in like the 90s. Um, but I think when you put someone like Adam Sandler or Nicolas Cage in a dramatic role, something comes out in them that I'm like, I really love what I see. And that was the case in this. I think Nicolas Cage did a great job. Also, if you all haven't seen, what was the movie we were talking about with Adam Sandler on the spaceship alone that just came out?
Oh, I don't remember what it's called, but I do remember talking about it.
Yeah, we didn't talk about it on the show. Was it Outside Man?
Spaceman.
Spaceman. Yeah, there we go. If y'all haven't seen Spaceman, that I watched that at like 3 a.m. one night, and I was a little bit delirious, and it was like the best way to watch it.
That's how you want to watch.
Yeah. The other thing I watched that was a surprise connection to American Arcadia was I rewatched Nanette.
Mm.
Hannah Gadsby has been back on my Instagram feed just because there's a new show that she's touring with, and I'm like, I was like, oh, I should rewatch Nanette because I loved it, and I haven't seen it since it came out. I watched it the one time, it broke me, and I was like, I can't watch this for a long time. Rewatching it now was really interesting considering we had a section of the game called Don't Break the Fourth Wall, and that is one of the core pillars of Nanette, is that the fourth wall is broken with the audience, and Nanette asks really uncomfortable questions about what an audience is doing when they're watching comedy, like what the intention is, what
Mm.
their what do they hope to get at when they pay for a ticket to a comedy show. If you haven't seen Nanette, it is absolutely worth watching. It is funny, it is heartbreaking. It is something that will stay with you for a very long time. I think in the sort of current modern age, it's one of those pieces of art that I'm just like, everyone should watch this at least once. And I think, again, it goes into some really interesting themes about particularly trauma being used as entertainment, which is something we'll talk
Hmm.
about with American Arcadia.
So real. I'm glad that you brought that up again. I'll have to give it a rewatch.
Yeah.
Hannah Gatsby's absolutely one of my favorites. I've watched all of her specials. I saw her live a couple years ago. I
Mm-hmm.
am a huge fan, and I always walk out like not just having a good time, but like having deeply considered some aspect of my own life.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. It takes a truly talented and introspective person to be able to not only do that for themselves, but also bring other people on that journey with them.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, absolutely one of my faves. So I am. Thanks for putting that back on my radar. I got to get back
Yeah.
into it.
Yeah.
That's a great great
It's
idea.
a good rewatch. And then just to close out for me for this section of the pastry case, am I picked up the Three Body Problem, and I will be rereading it because the last time I read it was years ago. And actually, shout out to Valis in Discord, who is currently also going through and like taking notes and doing a comparison on the Netflix show and the book. So if y'all are interested, go into Discord. It's just another avenue to have like just really good conversation about media and consume it, savor it more slowly, and really deep dive into it and like what we want to get out of it, and also maybe see what the different mediums. I'm really excited to see how the different mediums either help and enhance the message versus maybe make it less accessible for people. So yeah, excited to do that, and so you should join us if you find that interesting. It's like the book
That's a great
club
one.
for the video game book club, you know what I mean?
Oh no, more homework.
Opt in. You can opt
Very
in if you
cool.
want.
Optional.
Yeah, for notable releases this week, we just have two. I don't know. Did you want to take the first one, Joel, or do you have a preference?
Why don't you take the first one and I will take the second one?
Okay, cool. So the first one is Surmount, Little Climbers on a Big Adventure. It's coming out May 2nd on Switch and PC. This one is one I've been really looking forward to. It is a climbing game in the veins of, I think, any sort of physics, ice climber, not Bennett Foddy. I would say it's not that challenging, but it takes little tinges of that. And you're attempting to climb a mountain that has been impossible for other climbers to make it to the peak of. I'm excited because it seems like there's going to be a little bit more of a narrative that helps you as you climb and that you'll experience as you climb. So it's not just kind of fun climbing physics, challenging shenanigans. It's going to hopefully be, or I think, a little bit more thoughtful. So excited for Surmount.
Next game on the list is Indica. Play a third-person story-driven game set in alternative Russia at the end of the 14th century, where religious visions clash with harsh reality. Indica tells the story of a young nun who sets off on a journey of self-discovery with the most unusual companion by her side, the devil himself.
Dun dun dun.
This is the developer for this is Odd Meter. Publisher is 11-Bit Studios. Release date May 2nd. I gotta say, this game was not on my radar, and I will absolutely be playing it. I lived in Russia for 6 months,
Yeah.
and one of my favorite books of all time is The Master and Margarita, which is like the premise is what if the devil visited Moscow
Mm-hmm.
during the or just after the Russian Revolution and is trying to decide like how much have things really changed.
Mm-hmm.
And so this game is just like someone just wrote Joel and stamped it on all over it. So the vibe looks like very cinematic, very story driven. So I'm super pumped for this one.
Yeah, me too. I'm really excited. I played the Steam Next Fest demo for it, and it was so good. Like, there's, they have these moments where you do hear the devil in Indica's head, and it is just so dark and insidious, and the ways that they juxtapose, like, sort of her some of the visions and some of the ways that she's taken away from like reality as she's thinking some of these thoughts. Oh, it was just really powerful. I can't wait to play this one. um
Well, I'll have a notebook out for this one, and
yeah.
even if we don't end up playing it as a book club, I'll bring some thoughts because this is like so my vibe.
Yeah, honestly, just just spoiler alert for future curations. I was thinking we would play this for sure because I think your expertise in Russia and Russian history and culture, just from what you have as in terms of background at least, is something that I think would be really cool to play this game and utilize. So yeah, I'm sure we'll be playing it. It's
Fun
just a matter of
times.
when. Um, cool. So that's it for this week's pastry case. As always, feel free to email questions and comments to jenny@geeksandgrounds.com or post any in the Discord, post on the YouTube video if you're watching there, or on Spotify because you can technically, I think, post comments on Spotify, even though I feel like I've never used it before. There is, I saw it does exist. So if you would like to, feel free to do it because I do check it every week. Um,
Let us know about your favorite 15th century Russian work of art
yeah.
and get in the comments.
For this month's brew, again, we are talking American Arcadia. This is the final episode of American Arcadia. As a reminder, next month, what is it, April, May? For May, we are playing Hyper Light Drifter. So if you haven't already picked up your copy, if you would like to play along, we're getting started with that very soon. But today we are doing a full finale spoiler deep dive into American Arcadia. So, oh,
Can I just start? Can I just start
yeah, please
by
do.
thanking you, Jenny, by thanking you
Oh my
for
god.
bringing this game into my life. This is my so far my game of the year.
Wow.
I loved every aspect of this story and how it finished, and like it got me by surprise in several ways. And I just from a storytelling perspective, wow, absolutely blown away.
Yeah, that is high compliments from Joel. Dang. We'll have to send that to the team. I think they'll appreciate hearing that for sure. Yeah, there were some twists and turns. Well, I will say, I feel very proud of us because I think we predicted pretty well and pretty accurately some of the major plot twists.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but I think what was really cool, and we said this last time, was when we were talking with the devs, is that the plot twists, all many of them still had elements that I did not predict, which made them so exciting to see pan out. Um, let's begin as we ended last week, or I guess 2 weeks ago, because the interview was last week. We ended our last conversation as Trevor is driving towards the spire yelling. We have seen everyone is watching the live stream. Angela is realizing the only way that Trevor could have been caught on the live feeds is that Six was the only person who knew where Trevor was, and Six had to have leaked that footage to the press, to the media, to Arcadia. So we are coming into the climax of this game. Uh,
The way this game subtly tells story is incredible. So we ended our last chapter with the kind of like mind palace experience with
mhm.
Trevor kind of being reprogrammed. We talked about kind of the ethics of that and what have you. Angela has this revelation, and the next thing we see is Trevor driving. And Trevor is like unrecognizable as a
Yeah.
character. He is, I'll use the word aggressive, but in not a negative way. Like he is assertive aggressive.
Mhm.
And you can tell that he is uh, not going to be passive and is actively taking control here. Now, we can debate like we did last time,
Mhm.
like how much is that, we've changed his brainwaves. So is he really in control? Regardless, the energy he
Yeah.
brings to this scene and the entire chase scene through the spire, because he's trying to get to, what's her name? I can't remember. I lost the name.
Vivian.
Vivian. Thank you. I was like, Lydia. No. Vivian's penthouse was incredible.
Mhm.
And it was also the moment that I was like, he is actively going to the spire. He's making this publicly known. And the only reason he knows about this is because the bad guy explicitly told him there is a button at the top of the spire.
Yes.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Wait just a doggone minute.
Yeah. I was like, this is some weird, like, James Bond, um, Dr. Evil, like, not what is, you know what I mean? It's like everything about Arcadia and how insidious it is has been so intentional and like concrete and tight that the fact that Vivian was like, my failsafe button that is the only thing that can
The
get you
only
free.
place.
Like, escape Arcadia is at the top of the spire. And you're just like, in the moment, I did not think twice about it, to be honest. I was just like, okay, yeah, Vivian's, but you're right. As soon as we get to Trevor barreling his way to the spire, there was something in the back of my mind of like, not only is Six leaking this stuff, which is weird, and we had the theory that somehow maybe Vivian was related to Breakout, but also very weird that he only knows how to fix things, with the one button in the world that can do it. It's wild.
It was, yes, and it was interesting because like he has made the choice not to escape himself, which
Hmm.
was kind of what we had been building towards, and this radical change in direction felt so. Um, I'll use the word scripted. Like there's a moment when you're running away from these agents where it's like
Right.
none of these guys are catching up to him. Like there have been a lot of chases where the agents were faster than you. What's going on in this like massive chase scene? It's like, no,
Dare I
I don't
say
know.
programmed? Maybe because the anti change. This was what I was. This is what I was trying to get. Where I'm like, I don't think. Like, I think there's an element of allowing Trevor to feel maybe emotions that he hadn't been allowed to feel. Like, there's no doubt there's a
Yeah.
part of Trevor that got unlocked when the anti jingle was applied. But there's, again, I was suspicious from the start because I was like, this. is still telling him to do something. And even a little later, like right after the chase, he makes a comment of like, instead of being pulled away, I'm getting pushed in. And I was like, oh my gosh, like you're still feeling the jingle. It's just a different direction. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
what I love that we haven't talked about yet is that our perspective in watching Trevor from this point, mostly through the rest of the game, has evolved. And this is what kind of blew my mind. Instead of looking at Trevor as if we were looking at like a 2D side scrolling kind of puzzle platformer, we now are looking at that window as if we were watching a stream on Twitch or any other
Yes.
live stream service. Cause, I guess technically there's others, but it looks like a Twitch stream. We see the chat on the side, we see like the borders of the overlay. This made me feel some kind of way. This really gave me a
Yes.
lot of feelings when I saw it
What were some
because
of those feelings, Jenny?
I felt really discomforted by this. I felt really uneasy because, again, we've already experienced how the changes in perspective between Trevor and Angela have made us feel in terms of the parts and the role we play in playing this game. And being part of the narrative. And so now we have added we have become a third character, and that character is ourselves as the player and as the viewer.
Mm-hmm.
Or I guess we are now the viewer, and I think it felt really discomforting to not be Angela in that perspective. You know what I mean? It's like anytime we viewed Angela or Trevor, it's been through Angela's like CCV perspective, CCTV,
Mm-hmm.
and that felt like we were helping. In becoming a viewer of the live stream, we became just like passive consumers of American Arcadia, and that felt really bad to me.
I totally agree. It was like there's a discomfort of like the only thing that's missing from this view is a streamer adding their color commentary
Yeah.
as the getaway is happening. Like
Yeah.
that was the one thing that I was missing. I was like, well, where is like that famous YouTuber that's now on Twitch that's like adding comments about how like, oh, this is probably all fake anyway or whatever.
Mhm.
Like that was the only element that was missing. But I was like, this is such a direct commentary on the culture of like what it means to be an audience and what your responsibility is as an audience member.
Yes.
Oof.
Yeah, it really it hit home in a way, and it got me thinking a lot about like, again, the question we've been asking about like what what does it mean when you choose to give your attention to something, and what does it mean when
Mm.
you choose to not give your attention to something? And
Mm.
it felt really uncomfortable, and I'm like seeing as you're doing this chase scene, which by the way I think was probably one of the strongest chase scenes in the game, thank
Loved it.
goodness.
It felt amazing from beginning to end.
Yes. um so thank you to the developers for like, I think if this had not stuck, I think the ending would have felt very different for me. But because the
Yeah.
chase scene also was like super, I felt like I knew where I was going. Everything was clearly signaled. There was time for me to think. Um, I was able to get into sort of this element of where I was thinking as I was playing.
You still felt urgent as you were
Yeah.
playing it.
Yeah. And I think Trevor yells something. Once he makes it to the top of the spire, he's getting ready to push the button. I don't maybe no, this is when he just gets to the spire. And he yells that your sole source of entertainment can't be other people's lives. And I was just
Oof.
like, ah, damn.
Especially this kind of like edited, commercialized version of other people's lives. Like,
Yeah.
oof. I
Yeah.
will say there was also a strong signal at this point. It was kind of like the final puzzle piece for me was when you are climbing through the vents
Mhm.
and the chat is still running.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, so the cameras are in the vents. They know where he is.
Yep.
The chat is there. I was like, that kind of seals it for me. This whole thing is part of the plan. It was like the final
Which I
confirmation.
felt so good about because I'm like, we called it. We totally called it. Pat on the back to us. I love it. I love it when you can predict those things. Because again, the journey it took to get there was surprising. And so
Yeah.
that for me was a strong point. I will say, in the midst of this chase, we cut to a really interesting segment where we learn Javert is actually one Terry Robinson,
Classic Terry.
classic Terry, an actor who is playing an intense interrogator. And at this point, I think kind of like your vent moment, once we learn that Javert is a actor,
Hmm.
I start wondering, the question I asked myself was, where does this show end and reality begin? And that's when I also got into, okay, if they are including the essentially the military, quote, military sort of cops as part of the show, not simply security, they have stuff in the vents. All of this is staged. Where does the dome actually stop? It's like kind of my question that I wrote down here because I was just like, oh my
I
god,
love that.
this is
Well,
wild.
and I think actually for me it was the Office right before the Terry Robinson review,
Yeah.
because on the whiteboard there is a flow chart
Yes.
showing Trevor's journey, and there's like one split point where it's like, is he going to go to old Arcadia or is he going to go to this other place? And I can't remember what it was.
Yeah.
And then the last box is the Spire, and it's just like,
Yes.
God, that's good storytelling. That is
I
such good
know. Because it's like,
storytelling.
because I think if maybe you were looking at it cursorily, you could have been like, oh, he just yelled on the live stream he's going to the Spire. Maybe they made that box like right as they were leaving to get him. But that doesn't make sense because it's like, why would they finish the flow chart when the things are happening? So yeah,
Yeah.
it definitely shows that this was something that was planned, that they knew that that was the end goal. Oh, it's so good. Um,
And in that moment, Angela picks up a flash drive that has
yes.
video footage of the escape, and that's a really key element as the game proceeds.
Mhm. We cut back to Trevor. He's running up a bunch of stairs. He's saying, how many stairs does this place have? I don't think this was intentionally a Final Fantasy VII reference, but it felt like one to me. And I'm
Oh,
because, like, in Final Fantasy VII, you're breaking into this, like, all seeing corporation,
hmm,
running up a bunch of stairs, getting tired. And yeah, I took it
I
as a
forgot all about that. I think
final
you're right.
Final Fantasy's on my brain. So yeah, I was like, that's hilarious to me. Um, he runs through the discotheque, the Steve Just's club, and he punches Steve in the face.
So good.
Oh man, knocks him to the ground, and as a final kicker is like, by the way, this is a reality show, and he keeps on running.
Okay. I did my best to actually watch the chat as I was playing
Yeah.
to look for funny moments.
Yep.
And for me, the funniest moment that I saw in the chat was after he punches Steve, someone puts "Get good, Steve" in the chat.
And then everyone drops the Fs. Yeah, I thought it was hilarious. And in the chat, you have people being like, Steve greater than Trevor, and people being like,
Yeah.
Trevor greater than Steve. Um, the chat was very fun to watch.
I would love it if y'all in the community were picked up on other like funny moments in
Yeah,
the chat. Like, definitely throw those in the
please
Discord or
tell
in the
us.
comments,
Yeah.
because like I kept finding little ones, but I was so busy running that I didn't write them down. But
Yeah.
God, that was so, they really nailed like the voice of a chat.
Oh my
Really
gosh.
like that.
Yeah. A lot of people being like, "Hey everyone." I also thought it was a little bit interesting, and this is another smaller little nudge of like, "Hey, this has been pre-planned and programmed." A lot of people say, "I came here because of the American Arcadia ad for this event or like for this live." And I thought that was really, I forget exactly, I didn't write
I
it
missed
down,
that.
but there was an ad and I was like, it's weird that they would come here through an ad for this. Like, you could have interpreted it as, hey, American Arcadia is so big, perhaps they just have ads running. But the way
Mm.
it was phrased made me feel like this was a pre-planned ad for this big event or this stream specifically. So I was like, that for me was another signal. This is planned by the executives of the show, and it's not as spontaneous as we may have made it out to be.
That's a really good clue. I'm glad you took note of
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Wow.
Wild.
You
Um,
also, it's like in around this time that we break back to Kendra going into like a
or
control
Angela.
room. Angela,
Yeah.
what did I say?
Kendra, who we
Well,
do have a
because what I'm about to say, Kendra calls, and it's like the height of like of not. I apologize to anyone in the audience that is offended by this, but like the height of that like white woman Karen energy,
Oh,
where she's like calling to bitch about Angela, she's like telling her off,
yeah. Mhm.
and then eventually Angela just is like, no, I'm not taking this anymore.
Yeah.
Like I'll you know I'll take the severance or whatever. I'm going to sue you and whatever. I loved that moment of like giving Kendra back the energy that she's been bringing this whole time.
Mhm.
Felt so cathartic.
Yeah. It felt great. I love that Angela was like, "I quit. You can't fire me. That means I can sue." And I was just like, "Yes, Angela, get it." Um, yeah, man, Kendra. Oof. Honestly, I think I dislike Kendra more than I dislike Vivian in some ways.
It's like you hate Umbridge more than Voldemort in the
Yeah,
Harry Potter series kind of
sure.
thing. Because
Exactly.
it's like, I know this person. I don't know Voldemort, but I know
Yeah.
Umbridge. It's like, I know Kendra's. I don't know any Vivians, but I
Yeah.
know Kendra's.
Yeah, exactly. We then transition back to Trevor after Angela plugs in the flash drive, which I noted because we start at about 1 million viewers. At this time, we're at 4 million viewers. This is record breaking because I remember earlier they were saying, I think the last biggest broadcast was like 2 point something million viewers that they had. There was a
Mm.
reference to that being like either one of their latest big broadcasts or like the all time cap. So we have definitely beat, like we are blowing the metrics out of the water at this point. Um, and then this is where we learn the absolute truth of what's going on. Trevor presses that button. Nothing seems to happen for a couple of seconds. And then the screens change from behind him, change from black to Vivian saying, "Welcome to our first ever escape from Arcadia, like winner."
Boof. We've blown the lid off.
Yep.
They've planted the seeds. They put the horses back in the stalls. I don't know what metaphors I'm using
Right.
anymore. They put the train back in the station. It was like one of those moments of just like, you son of a bitch! I can't believe you really did it, didn't you?
Right.
Like mm. But then we get one of the ultimate get backs in video game history, which is the end. The show gets cut off or cut into by Angela showing like the real footage of just how violent and dangerous all of this has been for Trevor.
Mhm.
And it was like one of those things where I was like, in today's world, this was the ultimate power play to give you any sort of like upper hand with whatever comes next.
Mhm.
If this doesn't happen, then there is your options as Trevor or as Angela are like basically zero.
Right.
So it was like, again, as a story, the perfect turnkey like climactic moment to
Mhm.
interrupt that broadcast.
Yeah, Angela comes in, interrupts the feed. Uh oh my gosh, just yeah, perfect timing on her part. You see a couple of scenes where, she's like, "This is Trevor, this is what they're doing to him." Immediately they cut the feed. And like when a corporation like that cuts the feed of a live show, something has gone horribly wrong. I loved it. We then learn because I think Trevor says something along the lines of like, well, you can't get away with this even with the live feed cut because, Breakout knows everything. Six is on your tail. And this was the twist that got me because I did not think this was going to be the case. We learned that Six is none other than Vivian Walton, who is none other than Emily from the Arcadia Six. Oh my goodness. That blew my mind.
So I 100%, I probably about midway through the game, I was like trying to notice who was talking and at what times.
Right.
Whenever you have like a vote, a masked person or whatever, I'm like, who is not talking when that person talks? And
Mhm.
the only person that fit the bill once you get about midway through the game is Vivian. So like her being 6 to coordinate this, especially once we learned this was planned, I was like, it has to be her.
Right.
The reveal that she was authentically one of the
That's
6
what
was
got
the
me.
thing that like unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah, because again, yeah, going with like the thread of knowing that this was a produced, because the whole time from the jump, we were like, this has to be staged somehow or impacted somehow by the producers. Like, this is not happening without the producers' knowledge.
Mhm.
So I had a feeling Vivian, yeah, could be 6, could be maybe behind 6 if 6 wasn't Vivian, but I was like, there's going to be some connection there. Yeah, the fact that Vivian was one of the original Arcadia 6 was not something I had in my bingo card. I was totally shocked. And this was a really great the conversation they have as you Trevor learns this is a great
Mm.
foil to the conversation that Trevor has earlier with like Angela and 6 or Vivian, and some of the discussions we had about that choice of what do you do when you know this is not real, that this is a reality show? Do you choose to go back into Arcadia? Do you choose to stay or do you choose to go? And I was just like, oh, this is perfect. Like, what a great, oh, just what a great like conjunction of everything we've been discussing and
And
pondering.
like she spits some real shit here. Like the stuff that she says about like you're a 30-year-old with no real skills or knowledge of the real world and you're going to have to go out there with no safety net and pay bills and get a job and
Hmm.
and was like exactly kind of it's like the inverse of the conversation we've been having all along, which is like, would you move there? The
Right,
question of like, would you leave there, I think is a very difficult question.
right.
And the idea that like she breaks with the rest of the 6 and is like, I'm going back to the machine and I will spearhead what is a in my opinion kind of the abuse of 30,000 humans.
Mhm.
uh it was like it felt like I felt betrayed, you know, like
Yeah.
as if I were one of the other 5 people that had escaped with her.
Mhm.
Like I felt that sense of betrayal. So I don't know, did you have any like when she says this and she's like talking about the realities of getting out, like what were some of like the feelings and emotions you had around that scene?
Yeah, I think definitely I think betrayal is a great word. I'm glad you brought that up because I think there was this feeling of, even though I didn't necessarily trust 6, I at least had hoped there was this camaraderie and like at least similarity in terms of values and like what we were hoping to achieve. Even and again, I'm like I was suspicious, but there was the hope. And so seeing that hope get kind of like dashed down was a bit rough. And I think what was really interesting to me was the fact that she said that she begged to, get back into Arcadia, get back into this loop of, somehow being a part of this show. But that also I think what struck me was that she made the comment of how we reached a settlement that everyone in the Arcadia 6 agreed to ultimately. Like maybe they weren't happy about it, but enough money was passed around to make everything kind of go away. And that for me was rough to hear, knowing that it is a reality that we live with today where enough money can make anything go away for anyone who wants it to go away. Enough money can at least, you know, make things the way they want it to be. I think that was just a
Mhm.
really kind of depressing realization within that game moment for me.
Oh, the depression of it all.
Yeah.
That's so, so true. There's elements of this where, you know, she goes on from this point to say, like, we're going to go live, Trevor, and you have the chance to
Mhm.
make this okay. And what becomes very clear is she has no fear of the truth getting out.
Yeah.
The only thing she's afraid of is the show not going well.
Mhm.
That like that is ultimately a threat that means something to her and means something to her power and stability. Whereas the word getting out that these people that we've known we've been torturing for 60 years
Yeah.
are indeed feeling tortured, uh that's not like that truth is already out there. Like
Mhm.
there's no risk in that. But the idea that like you could say something that dismantles my new show, that that risk is something that like she responds to.
Mhm. But it's interesting because she also makes the comment, because Trevor, in this, he's like, "Well, I'm not going to agree," or what makes you think I'm going to
Hmm.
go with this? Excuse me, go with this like settlement, essentially.
Hmm.
And she's like, I mean, the audience, ultimately, we just want to start this off on the best foot. At the end of the day, the audience is going to forget you after a while. Uh, I'm not the villain. The audience
The
only
audience is
cares
the
when
villain.
you're miserable. If you're not, we'll find someone else. The show will go on. It's just a matter of what do you want to get out of this as we're moving forward. And again, it's like it's really interesting because after finishing this game, I was like, oh my God, I want to like see the other reactions of other people. Like, what do other people think about it? And a lot of sentiment that I read online was like, oh, I'm so disappointed that this ended like this. And I don't like the ending because they just reach this sort of like all it is money talks at the end of the day. And while I am not happy about the ending, I am happy it ended this way, because I think if it ended with something happier, I probably would have felt like narratively betrayed. Because I think there's this element of with this game being so timely and poignant for right now, that
Hmm.
is the reality right now. And I think it's important that we recognize that to some extent. I don't think it's a reason to be to lose hope. I think that's a whole different conversation. I don't think this is a reason to be like, oh, well, if the only thing that's talks is money and I guess we can't do anything about it. I don't think that's the answer I would get from this game, but I do think it's a realization of we need to understand what powers are at play. And I think this game shows that really well.
Like imagine if one person came out against Disney today and said, I've been really getting mistreated by Disney. Is everyone going to stop watching Disney stuff? No. Is everyone going like is there going to be harsh penalties on Disney? No. Like I there was something that was like obviously disappoint we haven't really even talked about like what happens at the
Right.
end yet. So there's something disappointing about the fact that like American Arcadia doesn't just like go up in flames because of these actions. Like you
Hmm.
kind of want that feeling and that sensation,
Right.
but I don't think that would have been a good payoff for the very visceral reality that I think this game has been steeped in all along.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think it would have been almost disingenuous, like, because I think one of the sentiments that we hear often, especially in like more like leftist activist spaces, are like burn it all down. And there's this element of like, oh, why didn't Trevor like burn down the building, like literally just destroy everything? um And I think that would have also just been disingenuous to this character. Like,
Hmm.
Trevor wouldn't have done that. Angela
No.
wouldn't have done that. They're both not equipped. They don't have the community to do it, the support systems. Like, we've learned the only support system that Angela had was actually Vivian slash Emily in the first place. And so I think it would be very unrealistic if the game ended and continued to go through this ending in any other way. Um, so we then cut to Trevor in present day.
With his new sparkling goatee, he's no longer the mustache man.
No, he's not. Um, Now, what's really interesting is he makes this comment that says, "I the one thing Vivian said one thing that wrecked it for her," and she says, "You know what to do, Trevor. Don't be a
Don't be a
fool."
fool.
It's like the one thing that you could have said to set him off. The only thing in the world that could have sent him off. She says it.
I thought that was so clever.
It was
I
so
I mean,
good.
it just I was wondering, like, after the one who's like, "What could it be? What could it be?" And
Mhm.
she says, like, "Do the right thing." And I was
Yeah,
like, "Oh, classic. Yeah, do the right
right.
thing." And like, "I'm gonna do the real right thing." But it was the "Don't be a fool," which totally
Oh,
got me by
man.
surprise. I loved it.
That was so good. And I forget, I didn't write this down and I should have, but Trevor, he goes to the podium and he says, like, "Stop fucking with me," or, like, something along those lines.
Yeah. Yep.
And I was just like, "This" that's, like, perfect, honestly. Like, I would
It's something that you can't sanitize. You can't be like,
no.
"He meant something else,"
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. Um, so then we cut to kind of the epilogue of this game,
Yeah.
um, which oh, geez, there's so much that happens. I think basically see that we see what happens as a result of all of this new show coming out because we know that the show has come out. We see, like you said, Trevor, he's got a fancy haircut now, he's got new digs, he's looking a little older, but still, like, he's living a good life.
Mm.
He has taken that settlement, or he has somehow acquired that money. I assumed it was
I think they
some
did say
sort
there was
of
a settlement.
okay, good.
Yeah.
um what I thought was really interesting is as, the credits roll, we see a lot of different pieces of media, like articles, posters, and shows that come up,
Brilliant.
and so I'm curious, what were some of the standouts for you that go through this epilogue?
Yeah, I'll just list out the ones that were, like, important enough for me to write down.
Mhm.
Arcadia Escape is the new number 1 show.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court says the jingle is legal. Kendra comes out with her own tell-all
Oh my
book.
god, Kendra.
The baby farm gets some scrutiny, but almost from, like, a National Enquirer type of
Mhm.
magazine. Steve is next. Steve begins hosting the next version of this escape show,
Yep.
and whoever voiced him does the best Chris Evans, like Captain
Mhm.
America impersonation I have ever heard. It was perfect. And yeah, so those are like some of the big things that I took away. Did you get any others from that?
Yeah, I also I wrote down the ones you wrote. The Rise of the Average Joe was really interesting
Mm,
to me. There was like sort of a Time magazine or like People magazine like article about the Rise of the Average Joe. The
yeah.
other thing that was really interesting to me is there's a note that Trevor and Angela started their own film studio, and we see a news article about the Solano Hills documentary, the
And
Tell All
this is like the
documentary.
last big like mystery finally getting solved.
Yes. So this for me was the confirmation that what we had been playing this entire time was a tell-all documentary detailing the true story of Trevor's exploits and escapes from Arcadia. Oh,
I remember, was it like 2 weeks ago in an episode when we were talking about how we like something else is going on with this documentary because it feels like someone is trying to like usurp or take down
mhm.
Vivian, and yet we knew Vivian, or we hypothesized that Vivian was actually behind a lot of this
Yeah.
somehow. And we were like, it just like it feels like there has to be some third entity that's trying to like boot her out or something.
Mhm.
And the fact that like all along it was Trevor and Angela that were that third entity was
Yeah.
just chef's kiss,
So
so good.
good. Yeah, and so the credits, they wind down. We cut to a scene of Angela and Trevor. They are finishing up, watching, I think, the documentary itself. You get like the credits, they pan out and the credits are like on the TV, which I thought was just a great transition. Um and I think they have a conversation that I think is really interesting where Trevor essentially asks like, do you think this is going to do anything?" And Angela just straight up says, like, we can hope, but I don't know. I don't think this is going to do much. I think we're at a stalemate at this point. Um, oh man.
Like this scene was shocking to me for several reasons.
Yeah.
Like one of them being we had had this conversation about how, with Trevor and his music, that like it was weird that the first thing that Angela suggested was that he become a musician. He was like, no, like I want this to be just for me. And then he goes on to make this like production
Mhm.
company.
Mhm.
That was surprising to me. Like with his reprogramming and his more assertive nature, it
Yeah.
made sense. I mean, I like it as an ending, but it was like something that I just did not see coming at all.
Yeah, I felt the reason I gave was that the reprogramming like stuck with him, and for me I was like I
Mm.
think this made him into a more assertive person, so it made sense to me that like this is a story he would want to tell to some degree. But yeah, it was a bit out of character for the Trevor that we'd known for most of the game, I would say.
The
Although
one element, oh, go ahead.
oh, so there was one detail actually in one of the magazine articles in the credits where I think it said Trevor, here's like Trevor's new style. He still hasn't given one interview since the incident. So also this is the first so now we know this documentary is the first and only time he's ever talked publicly about what's going on.
Yes. I think you raising this question about like, will this really change things,
Mhm.
was the thing that kind of was a burr in my saddle a little bit with this ending.
Mhm.
Is, he leaves the reprogramming chamber and his number one concern is, I want to free all the other members of this show that don't know what they're doing.
Right.
And while I think the documentary is a good way to build like a pop base of people that are going to like help advocate for you, which you have to have, like
Mhm.
there's no way that you can be successful without that. I just kind of wanted there to be some nod to what the next form of
Yeah.
activism looks like related to this.
Yes.
Like, hey, once we have these people engaged, we can really start making a push for change. Because it's not like he's going to go and like hack into the system and like
Right.
project on the screen like you're in a TV show and the sky isn't real and it's snowing outside. Which, by the way, fantastic detail.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. But some nod to what the next phase of activism is, I think, would have really been a nice cherry on top for me.
Yes, I am so glad you said that because I wrote down my last bullet point here is what's next. I wrote that down because I felt the same way. I think there's an element of reality of understanding that a documentary is not going to change things. It may cause more awareness, it may cause a bit of a buzz, especially, if it's the first time Trevor's talked, it's the tell all. But at the end of the day, it's like, what else are you going to do beyond that? Like, especially he and Angela are in this position where they can. And this got me thinking again about how there are reality TV show stars now who, after performing in these shows, being a part of them, are like creating nonprofits, going into like the government essentially and asking for bills and legislation and policy to be written to actually create protections. And so in my head, I would hope that like Angela and Trevor would move almost into more of that level of, hey, we need to not only like do more direct action, do this documentary, but like what are we doing on policy levels? Like what are the multifaceted ways we're doing this? I also had an arrow that said community because I think it's interesting that it's just the two of them that were kind of sitting there, which maybe narratively, it fits, it's the end of the game. But
Yeah.
part of me is like, what if Angela and Trevor like really met up with Breakout? Like what if they met up with other people who are trying
Oh,
to do
that
the
would have
same
been
thing? Like I would have
cool.
loved to see
Oh,
them find community and find other people to achieve this goal that we know that they're very passionate about because they created a whole studio to make a documentary about taking down this company. So I think that for me in my head is what I envision for them. I would have loved to see like even Easter eggs or nods to that, which we know the developers are so good at putting those nods in. That would have been cool, I think, personally.
I agree. I totally agree with that. Or like even like a freeze frame of them being interviewed by Congress would have been
Oh,
something,
right.
Like
Yeah, like in the
I
credits or something.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So I have a last one last mystery that I would love to get your thoughts on.
Hmm.
So obviously Six recruits Angela to kick this whole thing off, to light this candle. And first of all, that feels odd to me that they would have actors for every other facet, but they want a real activist for guiding him out
Mm-hmm.
when they don't ever air or talk about Angela to the American Arcadia audience.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's nothing happening in the chat. There's no reference to Angela whatsoever.
Yeah.
So it is odd to me that they
Mm.
chose to have a real activist break him out. It's like such a like of all the variables to not
Right.
have in your control, why that one?
You know, it's funny because Vivian even brings it up too when they talk at the end of the game, or in the scene with the, the button and everything. Vivian's like, yeah, the only like wrinkle in the whole thing was Angela this whole time. Like, and I'm like, you could have controlled, you had, what is it, Marcus Javert here, like under your control. The sentries were under your control. It was a weird decision. I think I think from a narrative perspective, it's an interest like it makes the story more interesting and believable because it's like we know that or we don't know who is in on what. But yeah, I think
Mhm.
from a company perspective, it's like, yeah, why would you do that? Do you think that because you would think or hope that all of your Walton employees are like Kendra level dedicated and would never knowingly consent to something like that?
Yeah.
So yeah, that is a really interesting wrinkle.
Well, and we're in her head basically from the beginning.
Right.
And so, like, we see her make mistakes. It's like, you're not an actor following a script here. You
Yeah.
left your phone in the office.
Right.
Like, you don't remember where it is. So there's something about it that's just like what it smacks of is like the prototype quick release that you have to get out the
Uh-huh.
door that you know you're going to improve on in the next iteration.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that I can really think of. So I don't know. I'm glad that it also is kind of a stuck in your crawl a little bit too. I
Yeah.
guess here's like a follow up to that though.
Mhm.
When do you think things with Angela got out of hand from the company's perspective? Like when did
Ooh,
she get off the rails that they wanted her on?
that is a really good question. Um, okay, I'm trying to like look back at my notes too to see sort of like the sequence of events and what's going on. Because I feel like for the most part, I think there were moments of exception, but I think honestly, she stayed on the rails for most of it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think there was ever too much out of it. Do you have, as I'm perusing through,
Yeah,
specific ones?
no, I've been thinking about this a lot because part of me is like, they sent Kendra to her apartment in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's when they were like, we want to catch her with something because then we can fire her and she'll lose access to everything. Uh,
Mm.
because she's not in Arcadia. She's a human with rights, unlike the zoo people
Right.
in Arcadia. So they can't send like the hat people after her. They can't send Justice
Inceptors.
for Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah, interceptors after her. Um, so to me, it was like, I wonder if that's the point when she was supposed to get caught.
Mm-hmm.
But then I think through how she continued helping Trevor in these next scenes, because the company wants Trevor to make it to the Spire,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And there are plenty of scenes where Trevor gets caught if it's not for Angela. Like, think about just the drones, even,
Mm-hmm.
where like she has to hack into the central systems to get the drones.
Right.
She has to be the one to discover the code
Right.
that breaks Trevor out of the jingle.
Right.
I mean, obviously they should know that. So maybe they knew it or whatever, but
Right.
like,
Well, it's like the like how it makes me think of like the design of the game, right? It's like they designed this game for two players essentially. This is not just a game for Trevor. This is a game for Trevor and Angela. I think which is why I'm like I think there are moments maybe where like Kendra checking in I think is a great example that you brought up where it's like maybe we have to like rein her in or maybe make her more cautious or like kind of put her in like
Oh, that's
a certain
interesting. It's a
place.
warning shot.
Yeah, like a warning and maybe it allows her maybe it kind of gets her more scared and willing to like trust Six and do whatever Six says, you know what I mean? So
That's because that is when she starts listening to Six more, is at
yes.
that moment.
Yeah. So I think honestly there were moments where maybe she like teased away from what they were planning, but they quickly were like, okay, that's we need to bring Six in and that can like rein her in. But I think everything honestly went to plan for the most part for them. Um which is
So
wild
it's like
to
when
think
she
about.
meets Javert, like is that when she's in the office and she sees the pipeline and she meets Javert,
Yeah.
is that the moment when it's like, okay, actually now you're not supposed to be like we were supposed to catch you when you were in the central core and the alarms were buzzing off, which we never saw
Mhm.
payoff for, but
Mhm.
maybe that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think there were these moments cuz again, now that we know that Trevor was like an actor the whole time, yeah, it just it makes now looking back on a lot of these events, you can see him in these fresh lights, which I think is really cool. So, I don't know. Hiding stuff from Kendra. Yeah, core power plant. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like the producers, even though they had moments of like, oh, Angela's doing some wild thing again, I think it's still they followed their plan to the T, and that's all that they needed.
She's the one who helps him get to old Arcadia. And that's the split, right? It's like go to old Arcadia
Yep.
or go to something else. And I can't remember what it is. And so I wonder if, because she like loses communication at that point too, like after the old Arcadia scene and the alarms are going off.
Yeah.
I really think it was that, yeah.
Well, no, because that was when Six specifically said, like, I'm going to be taking control here. I think that was intentional because Six, yeah, Six wanted to make sure Angela didn't mess anything up or, like, didn't, ruin anything. I forget what happened to Angela at that point. Where was she?
Well, that was right when you are unlocking the reverse jingle, the anti jingle,
Right.
and
Oh,
then
right,
the
right, right,
alarms
right.
start going off.
Yeah.
And so that's the only thing I can figure is like she was supposed to get caught when those alarms were going off and the
Mm-hmm.
building went into like double secret lockdown.
Yeah.
But I don't know because we don't see how she got out of that.
Yeah. Yeah. All I figure is it it all happened pretty much to plan for Arcadia. Like I don't think
Mhm.
I think this was just a case of them again, I think the biggest question and the weirdest thing is like why Angela? Why Angela? Like why did you pick her? Why was she the one that you think like did she already show signs of like being a bit rebellious and so they're like she'll be one that fits this profile? Like we think we can convince her cuz she's not a Kendra employee to like do this and we'll like inception her into doing this basically. But yeah, I feel like I need to think about this a little bit more. But overall, I
Yeah,
think
there
this
it's a
is it was
we should
oh go ahead.
let's definitely make this one of our questions for the end of month chat. I am so curious to hear how people like interpret this choice by the company
Mhm.
and when they think things got off the rails with Angela. Like, I'm just so curious about it because it's having Steve be like the guy in the chair that's
Mhm.
trying to like get people out. That is Disney. That makes sense to me. And like using a real activist is just like such an odd choice, but like
Yeah.
perfect for the game. Like it made tons of sense
Right.
and within the context.
Yeah. Again, I think maybe it was that element of like how real can we make it for people? Um,
Okay.
I don't know. But again, it's like people weren't watching Angela. People didn't know about her, but maybe how real can we make it for Trevor? Um, because if which again is not a great argument because it's like an actor could feasibly pretend to be
100%.
an activist and or pretend to be like oh I don't know what I'm doing but maybe it was an element of like oh do we need this to be as real as possible and then maybe they're like ha maybe not maybe we get Steve because at least we can control him but yeah I don't know
I gotta say, it would be just think about how psychologically damaging it would be if you were Trevor and you got out and found out that Angela was also an actor that was in on this.
Oh
Like,
man, yeah.
that would be absolutely heartbreaking. And I was honestly, there were moments where I was worried about that, but I was like, no, she makes too many mistakes. She can't be
Mhm.
faking all of this. It would not make sense.
Yeah.
But I was like, man, if they would have done that, it would have been absolutely devastating.
Mhm.
Like, there could have been a whole nother act of Trevor being like, I can't trust anyone on the outside. Like, put me back in or
Yeah.
something like
I
that.
mean, he makes that comment at the end where he was like, "Hey, I said I take a long time to warm up to people." It's like, probably because you're dealing with the post-traumatic stress of your life being totally upended. So, yeah, for
Mm.
sure.
Wow.
So that is it
Uh,
for American Arcadia. Again, let us know your final thoughts on the game. What you do you agree? Did you like this ending, or are you saying, this isn't the ending for me? And if so, why? We would love to hear it. We do have, uh, well, I guess as of this posting, the event would have happened. We would have already had this discussion with the community because that's happening. That would have happened at the end of April, and this is getting on the 27th. This is getting posted on the 30th. But again, if you have not already picked up Hyper Light Drifter, we are going to be playing that for the month of May. That was a community selection. So at the end of the year, we voted for 6 titles of this year to be community selected titles. And so this was one of those 6. And I'm very excited to play. So pick it up. Make sure that if you want to join in, you have it. And if not, again, it's always nice just to listen to also playthroughs of games and maybe vicariously learn and live through them. So, yeah, that's it for this episode, I think.
Thank you so much for joining us at Geeks and Grounds. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you all and learn about your experience with American Arcadia. From all of us to all of you, don't be a fool.
Bye.
Bye.